it says, chapter 8, it says, now, hey, doing good? Nice, nice. Okay, so people, good. Okay, so here we go. So it says, now, regarding your question about food, I don't know whether you remember that chapter 7 said, regarding what you wrote to me concerning marriages. So these Corinthian people had written to Paul, and there was a number of issues they were trying to find out from Paul. So in chapter 7, it was about marriage. In chapter 8, we are getting into stories about food. Okay. All right. So he says, now, regarding your question, hey, good, yeah, no problem. Hey, hello. So he says, now, regarding your question about food that has been offered to idols. Okay, yeah. So that's the kind of food that has been offered to idols. So the church had some concerns because remember, these people believe in Jesus. But now there's a situation because, first of all, I don't want you to forget that Corinth was kind of like a metropolitan city. In Corinth, like I said, most of these people are not Jews. They are Gentiles. The Corinthians, the people who lived in Corinth, most of them were Gentiles. Okay, so Paul is, we need to remind ourselves that Paul was an apostle sent by God to the Gentiles. I hope we still remember that, okay? So listen to what he said. So when he's talking to the Corinthians, it is where the Corinthians are that this problem is. Jerusalem, you hardly hear them dealing with a problem about to do with food offered to idols. Okay. So these believers have been faced with a question about food given to idols. And you know, we have things like that even to this day. You know, the Hindu people in some countries, they feed the people who don't have food. So they feed outside their temples. So it's things like that they're asking about. Okay. So he says, now, regarding your question about food that has been offered to idols, yes, we know that we all have knowledge. Okay. So Paul has a habit sometimes of telling us what we know. You know, he uses that a lot. We know this. We know that. We also know this. So this one is a place where he's telling us something that we know. But do you know, there might be a few of us that do not know what he is about to say. Okay. So let's see what he says. He says, yes, we know that we all have knowledge about this issue. Okay. But while knowledge makes us feel important, you know what? I want to change this to NIV. I think let's check out NIV. So let's start again. It says, now, about food sacrificed to idols, we know that we all possess knowledge. But knowledge puffs up, while love builds up. Now, let's find out what he's trying to say here. Paul is saying that every one of us has knowledge. Okay. And he's telling us what knowledge does to someone. Okay. When somebody asks you, hey, can you tell me about what I need to know when it comes to traveling abroad? Since you, who is being asked, since you have experience, you will share it confidently. Why? Because it is knowledge that you bear. You have the knowledge. If somebody comes to you and says, hey, I don't know how to cook, how to prepare a meal of a certain kind, could you please teach me? You who has the knowledge will teach the person. So Paul is saying, when you have knowledge, what knowledge does to somebody is it puffs them up, to puff, to make you feel like I got it all. It makes you feel I don't want to say good about yourself. It's more of a boast. It's a boast. When you have knowledge, what knowledge does is it makes you boast. And so there's people who have they've gone to school and they did so well with their education, and then all of a sudden you realize, this guy used to be very humble. What happened? The knowledge he has acquired has puffed him up. There's people, many times, people who get knowledge, it even changes their character. They don't want to associate with people who are not of knowledge, or people who don't have the kind of knowledge that they have. So that is why Paul says, knowledge puffs up, while love builds up. So when two people meet, let's say I have knowledge, okay, and I meet with somebody, what I want to do is I want to gauge the person. I want to know, how knowledgeable is this person? So I could start with, so what do you do? The person says, oh, I milk cows. Oh, is that your profession? Yes. All of a sudden, me who went to school, I feel superior to this person. So I've used my own merit to say, this person is not as educated as I am. So that is a puffing up that has just happened to me. I feel, oh, I'm the one who knows better than this person. Okay. But love does not do that. Love builds people. So say I meet with someone. How are you doing? Good. How is life? And the person tells me what the person is going through. And then I decide that I want to help the person in a way that I feel is lacking in his life, or in a way that I feel he needs help from me. Okay. So what makes me do that is love. Love makes me be concerned about a fellow person, a fellow believer, a family member. When you love someone, it builds the person up. Knowledge puffs somebody up. Love builds people up. Okay. So let's look at what he says. He says, knowledge puffs up, while love builds up. Okay. Knowledge is about yourself. You feel good about yourself. Love is about the other person. You're taking care of the other person. Okay. So he says, knowledge puffs up, while love builds up. Those who think they know something do not yet know as they ought to know. You would wonder, why is Paul saying these things? Paul is kind of preparing the ground for us for what he is about to tell us. So he's giving us some nuggets, some points to hold on to before he says, he'll now start telling us some very serious things when it comes to this topic of food offered to idols. Okay, so first of all, he touched on knowledge and what it does, and then he's touched on love and what it does, and then here he says, those who think they know. So you see, this is talking about knowledge. And remember, he just told us, knowledge makes people feel, I want to use the word superior. They feel they are better. Okay. So he continues with the topic about knowledge in verse 2. He says, those who think, you see, he says they are thinking. He didn't say those who know that they know something. He said, those who think they know something, they do not know as they ought to know. What that simply means is if you think you know something, there is still more you need to learn. If when you meet with people, you just want to show, hey, let me tell you about my trip here. Hey, let me tell you about chemical reaction. Hey, let me tell you about. So you feel like you know everything. You're the one that needs to tell everyone what is going on. He's saying, if you have knowledge, if you know something, you still do not know as much as you should know. In other words, be humble. Don't try to flex your muscle of knowledge. Don't try to show people how much you know. Okay. So it says, those who think they know something do not know as they ought to know. But whoever loves God but whoever loves God is known by God. Listen, if you love God, God knows you. It is, I know it is just a weakness in people. You want a man of God to tell you, God says that you love him a lot. That's when you're not like, oh, okay. Oh, so he knows. You don't even know what God thinks about you. So you want another man to tell you about your relationship with God. What is that? You want somebody else to tell you about your relationship with God. That is very strange if you think of it. Think of a spouse, a man and a woman, okay? The woman is not sure about the man. Meanwhile, she's the one who lives with him in the same house. She's the one who spends time with that man. But she's not sure of the man. Does the man love me? Is the man really concerned about my welfare? So that woman goes to find out from people, do you think he really loves me? And you are the one spending time with that man. A man is not sure whether the woman loves him because, and you have reasons. Well, she used to cook very well, but I kind of feel like her cooking has changed. I think she's doing it intentionally. Do you think maybe she's trying to send a message? And you're asking somebody who doesn't live with you in your house. Listen, the Bible here is saying, whoever loves God is known by God. So if you love God, God knows you. God knows about you and him. Okay. Verse 4. So then, like I said, Paul was just getting us ready for what he's about to tell us. And what he's about to tell us is very deep, very, very serious matter. Let's see. Verse 4. So then, about eating food sacrificed to idols. So you see now he's continuing with the topic. He said, you people asked me about food that is given to idols. Yes, okay. We know knowledge puffs up. love edifies, or love builds up. Whoever thinks he knows, let him know that he doesn't know as much as he knows. And whoever loves God, God knows that person. So you see, these are points that he has just said, but he's now going to use them in what he's about to teach us. So he says, verse 4, so then, about eating food sacrificed to idols, we know. So you see, he's back again. He's back to telling us about the things that we know. So he says, so then, about eating food sacrificed to idols, we know that an idol is nothing. Did you hear what Paul said? He says, we know that an idol is nothing at all in the world. Imagine that. That those statues that certain people worship, we believers, we know that those things are nothing at all. Imagine that. Imagine that. And there is somebody who is devoted to pray to that branch of a tree that is sitting in the corner of their living room. They even burn incense to a branch of a tree, and they kneel down and bow before a tree, a statue, a golden statue, whatever idol. Paul is telling us, we know an idol is nothing. So these people are worshiping nothing. And then look at what he says. An idol is nothing at all in the world, and that there is no God but one. So remember, he's telling us the things that we know. He says, first, we know that an idol is nothing at all in the world. And number two, that there is no God but one, and that there is one God. So we know that idols are nothing and there is one God. Okay. Verse 5. For even if there are so-called gods, remember, he just told us, we know that gods are nothing, idols are nothing. But then he goes further to say, but you know what? Let's say that they are so-called gods, because there are people who are calling trees gods. There are people who are worshiping stones. There are people who are worshiping cows, animals, mountains, and they will continue to call them gods. So even though we know that idols are nothing, there's still people who will continue worshiping those items, those things. So Paul says here, for even if, so he has already said there is none, but okay, let's just say, even if there are so-called gods, whether in heaven or on earth, as indeed there are many gods and many lords, yet for us there is but one God. So he's saying, we know there is only one God. We know idols are nothing. But you know what? Okay, let's just say, okay, there are many gods and there are many idols. Okay, let's just say, okay, they are there. But for us, there is only one God. Who? We who believe, believers, we know there is only one God. Period. Okay. But listen to what he says. Verse 6. Yet for us, there is but one God, the Father, from whom all things come, and for whom we live. Do you see? Everything comes from God. Comes from God. We who have the knowledge about God, we know that everything proceeds from him. So he says, yet for us there is but one God, the Father, from whom all things come, and for whom we live. So if somebody asks you, for whom are you living? You are not living for your sweetheart. You are not living for your children. No. You're not living for yourself. No. You are living, we are living for God. Imagine that. We are living for him. So, in us living, God is receiving glory. It is for him that we are living. All these years you've been thinking, I need to survive. Huh? Oh, I thought I heard something. All right. So it says, from whom all things come, and for whom we live. And there is but one Lord, Jesus Christ, through whom all things came, and through whom we live. Did you hear that? You need to get the difference. It is for God that we live. It is through Christ that we live. We live for God through Jesus. Let me say that again. We live for God through Jesus. When you accept Jesus, your life has now become God's. Now you don't live for yourself. Now you live. I live for God. Okay. So it says in verse 7, but not everyone possesses this knowledge. Do you see? We've been talking about one God. We are living for him. We are living through his son. But not everybody has this knowledge. This is knowledge that is available for everyone. But not everyone has that knowledge. So look at verse 7. But not everyone possesses this knowledge. Some people are still so accustomed to idols that when they eat sacrificial food, they think. Do you see that? It is not they know. It is not happening. They are just thinking. Do you see how your mind can be very serious in stopping you from receiving the blessings of God? Because whenever you think a thought that is misinformed, that thought, if you further it, if you follow it through, it will drive you further from the truth. It will take you further from the truth. You see, I like to do this sometimes. I think some of you have noticed. I did it with Popeye. I don't know whether he's on the line today. But a few days ago, this is what I like to do. I like to ask someone, how are you doing? And then somebody will answer. And when somebody answers, oh, I'm doing so well, I like to ask that question again. I say, okay. I say, okay, so now tell me, how are you doing? And then there's times when the person I'm asking, they'll go a second time. Sometimes you'll hear them pause. It's like, didn't I just answer that question? And then they'll say, well, I'm doing good. We're doing good. We're doing good. And then I say, okay. Now, I want you to tell me, how are you doing? And then you hear somebody go, Ah, now the person is responding to how he or she is really doing. We are so used to answering very fast. How are you doing? I'm good. Meanwhile, what you're going through is heaviness, is bitterness, is uncertainty, is worry, is fear. But we've become experts in masking our fears, our worries, our problems. And many of the times is because we know that this person won't even have the time to listen to me. He is just asking because it is a formality. When you meet somebody and you keep quiet, it looks rude. So the good thing is to say hello. So many of us, we just know, he's just saying hello because that is what we are supposed to do. It's expected of us. But when the person asks, how are you doing? Many people will just say, I'm good. Because they don't want to start getting into it. Okay. So look at what he says, verse 7. But not everyone possesses this knowledge. Some people are still so accustomed to idols that when they eat sacrificial food, they think of it as having been sacrificed to a god. And since their conscience is weak, it is defiled. Imagine that. Somebody, a believer that believes in Jesus, has gone to a place and these people cook, prepare food to their gods. Or at least they cook food and they dedicate it or pray to their gods. A believer who still believes that, hey, there are gods in this world. Because remember, Paul told us, we know that there is one God and idols are nothing. But he has also made us aware not everybody has that knowledge. So there is a believer who if he eats that food that was offered to idols, he will eat it thinking, I've eaten food that was dedicated to a certain God. Meanwhile, you who has knowledge, a believer, what you are eating, you are even taking the salads and the desserts. You're even drinking the drinks while a fellow believer there is still trying to ask himself, is it okay for me to eat or not? You finished, you're even going for the second plate. Your fellow believer is struggling there. Look at what he says. But not everyone possesses this knowledge. Some people are still so accustomed to idols that when they eat sacrificial food, they think of it as having been sacrificed to a god. And since their conscience is weak, it is defiled. But food does not bring us near to God. Did you hear that? Food does not bring us near to God. Do you know there are people who to this day, they think if you eat some certain foods, God is very pleased with you and he will answer you. There are people who are like that. There are people who believe if you eat certain foods, God will not be pleased with you. So look at this, verse 8. But food does not bring us near to God. We are no worse if we do not eat, and no better if we do. So your food does not mark your spirituality. whether you eat or not eat. Okay. All right. Verse 9. Be careful, however, that the exercise of your rights. So what are your rights here? Your right. So what is your right? Your right is to eat any food that you wish. But now Paul is saying, be careful that the exercise of your rights does not become a stumbling block to the weak. Did you hear that? People like to say, it is my right. It is my right. It is my right to do this. It is my right to do that. You are being warned. Be careful while you are exercising your right that you do not wound the conscience of a weak believer. Be careful. It is your right to eat whatever you want, yes. But be careful that a weak person who is watching you do what you're doing, it might affect his walk. So, verse 9, be careful, however, however, that the exercise of your rights does not become a stumbling block to the weak. For if someone with a weak conscience, did you see that? So there are people who have weak consciences. There are people whose consciences are weak. There are people whose consciences will not allow them to do what you are finding no problem in doing. Your conscience is not accusing you. If you remember, we read in Romans chapter 2, where we saw that whoever lives by the law will be judged by the law. Whoever does not live by the law will be judged without the law. And we read that the person who does not have the law, if he does things that are written in the law, then we say that the requirements of the law are written in his heart. And then the scripture said, his conscience sometimes accusing him, sometimes defending him. We gave an example of how your conscience can accuse you or defend you. I think the example we gave was if, say, a dog attacked, you are walking and there was a dog that started running after you. Now, you tried to see if you could run away. It was too late. The dog was too close. You tried to think, what can I do? And then your instincts kicked in. And what you did is you kicked the dog. And when you did that, the dog died. Your conscience will be very active. Your conscience will start telling you something like, okay, you have killed a dog. Okay, this is not good. And then your conscience will say, but listen, that dog was attacking you. That dog, you don't know what damage it would have done to you. You don't know how much it would have hurt you. So you know what? You are not on the wrong. You are defending yourself. And then you'll have, say, something tell you, no. You should have looked for a stick. Your conscience says, you saw there was no tree around there. You saw there was no stone around there. You saw there was nobody else you could have called on to. You could have called somebody for help. There was none of that. So you are fine. You did what you could. That is your conscience either accusing you or defending you. So in this case, it is defending you. But say in another case where you are talking to someone and then you get into a quarrel. While you are quarreling, a fight ensues. Maybe the person pushed you first. But all the while, you are hearing. People are there standing on the side. Hey, just stop, just go, just leave, just stop it, just go anyway. And you are even hearing something telling you, just go, just stop it. No. But because of the anger you had, you kept on entertaining, or you kept going back and forth with the person you were quarreling with. And then the person pushes you and you pushed him. But when you pushed him, he hit his head on a wall and he had a cut. And they had to go to hospital. They had to stitch him. Then your conscience is like, you should have left when this thing started. Then you feel bad. Why did I stay there? You should have left. You should have left. And you're like, man. So now you're blaming. So this time, your conscience is accusing you. Okay. Now, in a weak brother or sister's conscience, the weak person accompanied you. You who has a strong conscience. You who has no problems with eating food sacrificed to idols. But you see, you have the knowledge that idols are nothing. We just read it. But your fellow believer still believes, idols. I had a story that there was an idol they used to sacrifice to, and it used to show up live and walk around in the house. This person has not been separated from those teachings about idols. He still believes idols are active. There's believers that will believe things that will even irritate you. You're like, how can you be going to church and you still believe in things like that? But that is the situation we are faced with. There's believers who do not have the knowledge that is available to them. So it says, verse 9, be careful, however, that the exercise of your rights does not become a stumbling block to the weak. For if someone with a weak conscience sees you with all your knowledge eating in an idol's temple, won't that person be emboldened to eat what is sacrificed to idols? Now, when you read this statement, you can be confused. Paul just said this. Paul told us, we know that there are no idols and that idols are nothing in this world. We also know that there is one God. Okay. But Paul has also said that that knowledge is not everybody has it. Not everybody has the knowledge that idols are nothing. Not everybody knows that. Not every believer knows that. Some believers actually believe that idols are there. Idols are active. Idols are something. So when Paul says, if somebody has a weak conscience and he sees you eating food that is sacrificed to idols, I want you to understand what Paul is saying. Paul is saying To you who has the knowledge that idols are nothing is not a problem. But to the person with a weak conscience, you are eating food that has been sacrificed to idols. Do you see how tricky of a situation that is? So there's all this nice food you like to eat. And you normally eat. But today, because you are with a believer who thinks that idols are actually something, you have to be careful. Because when you eat food that weak person believes has been eaten, has been dedicated to devils, to idols, then that person will start to eat. But he's eating the food, but he's thinking, I'm eating food that has been sacrificed to idols. Do you see it is now your conscience? It is now the person's conscience that is fighting him. And if he sees you eating and he eats it, he will be sinning against his own conscience. And he will be sinning because you gave him the boldness to sin against his own conscience. This is very serious. So he says, for if someone, verse 10, with a weak conscience sees you with all your knowledge, you see, so you have knowledge that there's nothing about idols, forget. But he doesn't have that knowledge. So if someone with a weak conscience sees you with all your knowledge eating in an idol's temple, won't that person be emboldened to eat what is sacrificed to idols? So this weak brother or sister for whom Christ died is destroyed by your knowledge. Imagine that. Imagine that. When somebody comes to an idol's temple and he has a weak conscience, and you who is strong, you who has knowledge, and you know that there's nothing about these idols, when you go in there, it is good for you not to eat. Don't eat for the sake of the brother or the sister. Do you see your Christian walk is mostly about the other person? Hey, I want to go eat chicken in this idol temple. Hey, you're going with this weak person. Be careful. Don't let his conscience be defiled. Okay. So he says, verse 12, when you sin against them, do you see now all of a sudden, you who eats these foods, when you make somebody who doesn't believe in eating those foods, when they eat, you are sinning against them. Imagine that. What are these things we are learning? That's why it's important to know the word of God. Some of us are stuck because we don't even know what God says about whatever. So he says, when you sin against them in this way and wound their weak conscience, you sin against Christ. Imagine that. You're eating your food, it wounded a person on the side, you have sinned against Christ. Some of you have sinned against Christ, not knowing, because you are just about yourself. It's me. I'm the one who worked hard for this money. I don't care what anybody thinks. There's believers who talk like that. This is my money I'm eating. You can't tell me nothing. That's the attitude some believers have. It is my money. You don't belong to yourself. I don't belong to myself. We belong to God. He bought us fair. We read it yesterday. He paid a very dear price to redeem us, to save us. It cost him dearly. Okay. All right. So he says, when you sin against them in this way and wound their weak conscience, you sin against Christ. Therefore, if what I eat causes my brother or sister to fall into sin, I will never eat meat again, so that I will not cause them to fall. Imagine that. You forfeit nyama choma. You forfeit roasted meat. You forfeit rotisserie chicken. You forfeit, hey, I know somebody is getting hungry. You forfeit, you leave the food you love for the sake of a fellow believer in order not to wound their conscience or to sin against them. God help us. Therefore, if what I eat causes my brother or sister to fall into sin, I will never eat meat again, so that I will not cause them to fall. Imagine, eating meat could cause somebody to fall. What is that? God help us. God help us. God help us. Listen, here it's talking about meat. That's what we are talking. But listen, anything that causes but listen, I also want us to be very careful, because the devil can also take advantage when you now consider some other things. Then you'll hear somebody say something like, I don't even want to give the examples. Leave it alone. I know we'll get there. There's a time I'll mention it, because the scriptures, whenever we get to those scriptures, I'll mention them. So let me not go there right now. Okay, so let me start from verse 1. Here we go. It says, now, about food sacrificed to idols, we know that we all possess knowledge. But knowledge puffs up, while love builds up. Those who think they know something do not know as they ought to know. But whoever loves God is known by God. So then, about eating food sacrificed to idols, we know that an idol is nothing at all in this world, and that there is no God but one. For even if there are so-called gods, whether in heaven or on earth, as indeed there are many gods and many lords, yet for us there is but one God, the Father, from whom all things came, and for whom we live. And there is but one Lord, Jesus Christ, through whom all things came and through whom we live. But not everyone possesses this knowledge. Some people are still so accustomed to idols that when they eat sacrificial food, they think of it as having been sacrificed to a god. And since their conscience is weak, it is defiled. But food does not bring us near to God. We are no worse if we do eat and no better if we do. Be careful, however, that the exercise of your rights does not become a stumbling block to the weak. For if someone with a weak conscience sees you with your knowledge, with all your knowledge, eating in an idol's temple, won't that person be emboldened to eat what is sacrificed to idols? So this weak brother or sister for whom Christ died is destroyed by your knowledge. When you sin against them in this way and wound their weak conscience, you sin against Christ. Therefore, if what I eat causes my brother or sister to fall into sin, I will never eat meat again so that I will not cause them to fall. You know, that should show you right there that in this chapter that we just read, Paul is comparing knowledge to love. You could be a believer that has knowledge, and that knowledge is allowing you to eat whatever you want. But that knowledge is not applicable, or that knowledge, your brother or sister does not have it. He doesn't possess it, that knowledge that you have. He says, what you need to do then is walk in love, because love is concerned about the other person. So instead of operating through knowledge, whenever you are dealing with a person with a weak conscience, operate through love. You see? So there is places to operate through knowledge, which is fine. But there's times when you have to put your knowledge to the side and operate in love instead. In fact, we'll find out that we are encouraged in everything we do. We do it in love. We shall see it even better whenever we get to what people like to call the love chapter, chapter 13. By God's will, I believe we'll be there maybe next week. Okay. So we'll stop right here. We thank God. We praise God.